Osimi is gone. I am left to mourn his death. Can there be an occasion sadder than this? To me, he was not just Osimi, the scholar, intellectual, and friend. He was more than an elder brother to me. He was the epitome of the fabulous Central Asian civilization, a human monument embodying the eve and ebb of thousands of years of human history. Words cannot define his personality. It defies not only words, but also comprehension. He was colossus of a human being, a titan, in true sense of the term.
Muhammad Osimi's life affected not only those around him, but helped shape his country and is a vital lesson for our world today. His impact unfolds through the memories of those he touched, and that is the way he would have it, proud to listen to others. His journey is extraordinary. From a boy born in a town in northern Tajikistan to a doctorate in philosophy and ultimately bringing diverse groups together during a bloody civil war. He was a soldier, poet, a scholar, and a father. He was a leader, always a leader.
We used to ask a lot about the World War II, and he would show us all the scars he had from the World War II.
A graduate of Samarkand State University, Osimi and his two brothers entered the war, fighting in Leningrad.
من رفتم به لنینگراد نه به حیث اسپرانت بلکه به حیث کماندری بطری خودگرد نیم تانکیست و نیم ارتلریست یا هم تانکیست و هم ارتلریست.
Muhammad Osimi, going into battle, noticed one of their tanks had a broken hatch. He took that one.
He said, I'm gonna be in that tank that doesn't work. And they tried to lock it, but they couldn't lock it.
When he met the German enemy tank, he got shot by that tank, and their tank got on fire.
The door was of the tank saved him, luckily, because he could push it with his hand, with injured hand.
He jumped out, completely in fire. So his skin was burned. The only part which was not burned was eyes because he closed by hand.
And he was rolling on the snow.
It will be burned from head to toes, all over the body.
I wanna write a letter to my wife, he said. And somebody found a postcard. There was 2 roses, white and red. And he wrote in poem. بتو گلی از من مکافات مبارک خدا باز قدرتم داد.
5 سال 5 روز پس از خانه‌دارشوی ما من رفته بودم که 5 سال انتظاری من بودن و اولین خطی که من نوشته بودم در از شفاخانه و تو گلی از من مکافات مبارک گو خدا چون قدرت داد.
There was an old professor surgeon, he said, you know, you are so young and your face already gone. I can help you, but I could not do it without you. Let's make a deal. There's one difficult moment when the new skin grew up. It's so itchy. You could not hold it. But if you scratch it, the scratch will live for the whole entire life. If you can promise me you never touch your face until it gets again new, we'll go for it. And they make a deal, and he said that was the hardest temptation of all his life.
It was burning and it was itching, and he didn't touch his face, he didn't touch his hands and body. And then my father would say, it was very, very hurting a lot, but I listened to him, I was very patient, I didn't scratch my face, and the doctor was right, and it healed perfectly.
He did not express his experiences of World War II as a brave soldier who talks about his feats, but as a human being, thoughtful about humanity and the consequences of war for the world, for his own community, for the Soviet Union, for Europe and the United States, for everyone.
In 1946, my father still was serving army. Even the war finished in 1945. They wanted him to stay in this field. And they even foreseeing the very big career, military career for him. But my father again and again was asking them to let him go. And he thought that I want to serve peace through the promoting education, science, and culture.
Osimi's deep love of education and his quest for knowledge began as a young boy. It was a constant, even when he traveled to help his father in a distant garden.
They say donkeys are stupid, but our donkey was smart. He could find his own way to the garden and back. My brother would ride the donkey, never prodding it, and the donkey would take him there and home. My brother would have a book on the donkey. Yes, he would read a book while riding. Mostly he read Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He loved them and read them while on the donkey.
His early love of books began a lifelong appreciation for everything associated with culture. This passionate drive was clear when he returned to his home after the war.
I remember Father when he just returned from the war. Young and handsome and, for me, seemed very tall. He was always very busy. He left at 6 a.m. and came home late at night after I was asleep. Why? His brother's family rested on his shoulders.
In May 1944, our father, his brother, died in Leningrad. So we, the 4 children, were fatherless. And when Muhammad Osimi returned from the war, he took us under his wing, our upbringing and our education.
My Uncle Osimi's home was the only place we could go. My uncle raised us. It was his gift. His home was a home for us, orphans. My uncle and dear aunt educated us right in this house.
Osimi worked day and night to support his extended family. He always supplied food and shelter, but also a precious gift for the future.
He cared for our spiritual upbringing, our morals, our educational and cultural values. When no family could afford even the necessities of life, my brother brought famous books from the world. He brought home books by Sardi, Rudaki, Ferdowsi, Omar Khayyam, Works by Balzac, Shakespeare, Pushkin, Lermontov, Leo Tolstoy. He read himself and made us read.
He brought only books as a gift from his trips. We looked forward to it and we're glad. His kind wife gave me pens, pencils, and my uncle gave us books. And in doing this, he gave us a wonderful world to enrich our lives.
Besides buying books, he brought home copies of pictures of famous artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Shishkin, Levitan, Neprentsev, and he made us examine them. When we didn't fully understand them, he would tell us about the painter and the pictures. He didn't just think how to feed us. He also thought how to let us learn of the beauty of the world. Those pictures really contained the beauty of the world. As for music pieces, my brother had a special love for them, for classical music, and he understood it. When he was listening to classical music, he could tell us whose piece it was.
Often without electricity, the family couldn't listen to their favorite operas. So Osimi bought a gramophone, and the music of the world flowed through their home and into the hearts of their children.
We listened to music. So our favorite opera was Giuseppe Verdi's La Traviata. So we liked works of Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Mozart. My father first purchased a piano for the empty house. And he explained my mom, I want our children grow with music. So surely, we children, we played, and then grandchildren, we always played piano, and we were throwing the concerts, family concerts. When we have guests, local guests or maybe guests abroad, we would prepare performances. The sounds of our dear piano reminded us our happy past, and it seemed that our piano wants to heal our wounds.
Tajikistan located is very remote from almost any place. It's north of Afghanistan, it's west of China, and sort of southwest of Kyrgyzstan, and it's east of Uzbekistan. It's not a large country. It's very, very mountainous. Only about 6% of the land in the whole country is arable.
In a country as remote as Tajikistan, schools can be a challenge, more so after a war. But even with food and jobs scarce, Muhammad Osimi pursued education for his country's youth in the form of a technical institute.
The Great Patriotic War began, and together we rallied to defend our motherland and joined the army. We were in different units. So I first met Muhammad Osimi in Moscow. In 1956, I stayed in Moscow after postgraduate work. And teacher Osimi served as deputy rector in Kujan Teaching Institute. He then went to Dushanbe and founded the Polytechnic Institute. This school was created through his personal initiative.
By 1956, Osimi had worked his magic and was appointed president of the Polytechnic University by the Ministry of Schools in the USSR. Only there was, as yet, no school, no teachers, and no students.
In order to gather students from rural areas, he and the work group traveled around the country and campaigned for students to come to the school. In order to recruit teachers, he went to Moscow and Leningrad, searched for older students from Tajikistan who were studying in Russian universities, and began campaigning for them to return and teach here at our university. He was only 36 years old. Muhammad Osimi became the president at 36 and served as president for 6 or 7 years. I studied here because it was the first technical university in Tajikistan. As a student, I realized that having a technical background would be crucial for the development of any country. I'm very thankful for Muhammad Osimi, who inspired me to study science. Now I enjoy teaching the students. I'm also writing books for them.
For 5 years of study that I witnessed, I never heard him raise his voice, not only toward adults, but also toward the students. I never saw this in my life, which is amazing, because indeed, during this time, you need to educate a nation at such a high level.
I was a second-year student majoring in physics in Tajik State University when we were told that the teacher Osimi would teach us philosophy. When the class began, we had a huge room with 3 student groups in it. The room was so huge that only half the seats were taken. As Osimi started his course, the classroom began to fill up. A lot of students came, including ones who weren't in the class. We all remember the voice of the teacher Osimi and his distinctive explanations.
اما به نسل باید اعتبار بیشتری باشد که نسل ما هم باید در پایه نظم ما باشد، نظم عالم شمولی ما باشد. برای این ما گفتیم که باید ناصران ما از نظم بسیار مترقی امروزی جهان باخبر باشند. نظم فرانسه، اروپای، نظم روس، نصر اروپا و نصر روس باخبر باشند و نصر ما هم به پایه نظم هزار سال ما بردارند. اکنون سخن است استاد.
East and West. What Osimi was,
Mr. Osimi was the synthesizer of the East and West. He brought together Eastern and Western traditions because he knew both very well.
From 1962 to 65, he was the Minister of Education of Tajikistan.
He told me that if the country has no education, if the country has no science, the country will not move forward, will not develop. It's very important. We should understand it, think over it, and understand that without knowledge, without science, without education, it's a night without finding a road there.
After Sultan Umarovich's death, the government of our republic faced the question of who should be the next president of the Science Academy. It was decided that Muhammad Osimi was a suitable candidate. The president must be well-rounded with broad-based knowledge in all fields, not only science or education. I cannot fathom another person among the younger generation who could take this role. All my staff in Tajikistan are deserving and worthy people, but Muhammad Osimi is above them all. Then the government, upon recommendation of Pavlovsky, promoted Osimi and made him a member of the Science Academy.
And from 1965 to 1988, he was the president of the Academy of Science. So he spent all his life working in the area of education and science.
назначение, избрание Academica.
The election as president played a very important role in establishing and developing the academic institutes and science in the Republic. At that time, till the end, in a period of 5 or 6 years, he established the Institute of Oriental Studies, the Institute of Mathematics, of Physics and Technology, the Institute of Economics, and others.
He had an encyclopedic mind. It was easy to discuss any area of science with him and get his advice. And most importantly, he was very kind to all the staff and very tolerant of everyone. For people who worked in science, and anyone who worked hard and succeeded, he simply adored them.
Generally speaking about the role of Muhammad Osimi in the development of science and culture in Tajikistan, 3 points should be noted. The first is his personal contribution to science. The second aspect of his contribution is the development of science in Tajikistan. In general, all divisions of science that existed as departments were turned into independent scientific institutes. And most importantly, despite all his own work, he read the dissertation of each of his students with a pencil in his hand. The fact that we now have a sufficiently developed philosophical science in Tajikistan is certainly to his merit and the merit of his students. The development of the encyclopedic sphere in Tajikistan can also be attributed to his merit. Muhammad Osimi, in the Presidium of the USSR Academy of Sciences, was called the most intelligent president. The most intelligent president. It is very high praise.
The head of the Academy of Sciences is an exalted position not only in academia, but also in the country at large. As a result, Osimi was in a powerful position to help his country, but always with an eye toward the future.
There was one thing, there was a project to build up nuclear power plants in Tajikistan. And as a head of Academy of Science, he needed to sign approval for the project. So he refused. Whatever pressure came, he refused. He said, this is a source of water, of drinking water for entire region. And despite all pressure, he refused to sign. There's no power plants, no nuclear power plants in this region. It's just small things, you know. I think overall he looked in a very human way, you know, and he looked in a very long distance over time. So his decisions make like, not for now, it's for few generations.
He oversaw the publishing of the Tajik Soviet Encyclopedia. There were 8 volumes of the book, published in the Tajik language for the very first time.
When I did my postgraduate study in astronomy in Moscow, there were no textbooks in Tajik on the subject. That's why I started to translate an astronomy textbook from Russian to Tajik. Mr. Osimi edited the book, so we had the first textbook on astronomy in Tajik.
My father translated many books, especially scientific books, from Russian language to Tajiki language, especially students' textbooks. He has for physics, mathematics, because he wanted young generation to learn all the subjects in native language. My father was author and the editor of Russian Tajik dictionary, and it was in several volumes.
My teacher Osimi and I founded the Writers' Union of Afghanistan. We also founded the Afghanistan Academy of Science. His care and compassion for Afghanistan was just tremendous.
از سفرهایی که من داشتم برای من البته سفرهای افغانستان سفرهای خیلی مهم بودند و من نصیب شد که در تأسیس اکادمی علوم افغانستان شرکت ورزم.
He kept going there, despite the war. He went to this country without fear for his own life. The embassy representative would say, "Muhammad Osimi, it's dangerous there, do not go." And he would reply, "You can stay here, but I am going." And he did.
He understood Afghanistan. I must say that if at that time Muhammad Osimi would not put such efforts into establishing the Academy of Sciences, perhaps we would come to the conclusion that it can wait.
During the Soviet time, we had a huge demand for good Tajik language. We really needed Tajik culture back then and pure Tajik language. For all of us, and for me especially, the fact that teacher Osimi was an Orientalist and philosopher and knew our history and language and literature so well was key. He convinced us that we should know and value our Tajik history, language, and literature.
Born at the end of the 10th century, Avicenna is regarded as the most famous and influential of the philosopher-scientists of the medieval Islamic world. Among his over 450 written works, he composed the Canon of Medicine, which is among the most famous books in the history of medicine.
Academician Osimi was president of the Academy of Science at that time, and he headed a group of people who prepared the celebration of the 1000th anniversary of Avicenna. He created a proposal for the government of Tajikistan and the Academy of Science of the USSR in Moscow to create this monument. It was his personal proposal.
نمی‌خواستن اینجا ما هیکل گذاریم. حتی از مقام‌های رسمی از مسکو مکتوب آمده بود که هیکل در زادگاهش افشانه و در تاشکند کافی است، اینجا لازم نیست. تلاش کردیم و این هیکل را گذاشتیم. تلاش درباره قیافه‌اش هم بود، قیافه‌اش هم که ما اصلش را گرفتیم که فرزند خلق تاجیک است. مادرش ستاره بانو تاجیک، پدرش میرزا عبدالله تاجیک است، خودش هم تاجیک است.
In 1982, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, was supporting the Avicenna celebrations throughout Central Asia, including India. This allowed Osimi to meet a man who would become one of his dearest friends and colleagues, Dr. Kashi Pandita.
Osimi led a delegation of Central Asian region of the Soviet Union at that time, and he made a presentation in the combined session which we held in New Delhi, here in New Delhi. I can recollect he looked a very thorough intellectual, and I thought in my first meeting this was the culture speaking, not only the man, but Central Asian civilization was speaking. Because there was wisdom and philosophy in what he said.
به همین بها دانشمندان ایران و پاکستان هندوستان گشته برگشته می آیند. به همین بهای می شکل داده که با بسیار نیشکر یک خصلتی دارند که شاعری متفکر هستند. شاعر البته باید متفکر باشد، اما
The protocol department of Kashmir government arranged a singer for him, and he was a special person because he could sing Farsi Tajik poems. The song was like this: Kafir ishkam Musalmani mara dar kar nist, har rage man tar gashte hajati zunnar nist. So this was the song. It means I am an atheist of love. That means I am such a lover who has no religion. I have transcended religion. I am a lover. And then Osimi became so much ecstatic. He stood up and he began to dance there. He had appreciation for poetry, appreciation for music, appreciation for aesthetics.
I also remember that we used, when I was already going to school age, in the first class, he would walk me to the school and we will learn poems along the way. Many of them I still have in my memory. Shab raft o hadisi ma pa payan narasid, shab ra chi guna qissai ma bud daraz. It means like we was talking throughout the night and night has ended. That's not our fault. The night was short.
He was extremely at ease. He was very modern. And that happens when you're very cultured. You're not impressed with the world. You can just let it come and sit in your heart. And Mr. Osimi was like that. He once said this, it really caught me. He said, the men of culture are the hosts of history. The men of politics are the guests. He knew that politicians come and go. Those who produce culture, who hold to culture, who look up to culture, who are the guardians of culture, are the hosts of history. So I think he knew exactly what he was doing. It was not by sheer accident that he was heading this movement. And he brought the best writers and thinkers and artists together and really worked on it.
Teacher Osimi was a great influence on me becoming a sculptor. Because when I came to Dushanbe as a student, before Paivand was established, I met him, and he told me the way he envisioned the statue of young Rudaki. He explained all the images he held in his heart. He wanted to give them to me, and I saw everything with his eyes.
First of all, he was committed to truth. He always told the truth. He wanted people to be raised in the spirit of humanism, in the spirit of truth, and in the spirit of kindness. Once, in one of our conversations, he shared his worries with me. He was deeply upset by the fact that our ancient nation, a nation of great men, poets, philosophers such as Rudaki, Ferdowsi, Avicenna, Omar Khayyam, and many others, how could it be that a nation that gave to the world such great men was involved in a civil war?
باید گویم که هر یک تاجیک، هر یک شهروند تاجیکستان مسئولیت را احساس کند. هر یک سخنش را، هر یک قدمش را سنجیده گوید، سنجیده ماند. گوید که همین چیز به آینده من چی نفع دارد. حاضر باور کنید در تاریخ چندین هزار ساله تاجیکان از وحدت ملی دیده، از نگاه داشتن یگانه دولت تاجیکان دیده چیزی مقدستر برای ما نیست.
the Tajik economy had collapsed really some years prior to the fall of the Soviet Union. It had always been the poorest of the Soviet republics, and some 60% of its budget actually came from the center. It didn't have enough money to support itself or all of its citizenry on its own, and when the Soviets pulled out, of course, that extra 60% vanished, and so you had more and more people competing for less and less. It led very quickly to permanent demonstrations in the capital.
It was 1991 that I first went in to visit Tajikistan, and we were there on the main street and we watched as barricades were built. And on the one hand was this sort of pro-Soviet, old Russian, you could say, group, and then on the other side was a pro-independence, somewhat pro-Islamic group, and literally a barricade just in front of them.
David Lovett works to help struggling countries build capacity through a nonprofit called Operation Mercy.
We stayed for the next month, exploring, looking at how we could possibly work there in some kind of development projects. And I initially reached out and heard about this group called Paivand, which was Mr. Muhammad Osimi's organization. And literally I could not find him. It was so chaotic at that point. And a few months later, he showed up with a small delegation in New York City. He gave us an invitation, said, hey, I'm organizing this international symposium on Persian speakers and culture. Would you be willing to come? So I said, of course.
Even on that time of the difficult time of the civil war in Tajikistan, he believed that opening the borders, inviting intellectuals from outside, it will help to go out from these difficulties. So he would organize these Tajik forums.
Times, the war, disasters.
So it's August 1992, and I flew into Dushanbe into the middle of this really historic, amazing event that Mr. Osimi is pulling together of representatives from across the world who are focused on the Persian language and culture, and you could say broadly a theme of let's see what unites us, let's go beyond what the political boundaries and the things that we don't agree on and try to find some common ground. Unfortunately, it did get very bad in those coming months, and I think 70,000 people at least died, 500,000 became internally displaced, at least 100,000 crossed the border in the middle of winter into northern Afghanistan, which only begins to give a sense of how bad it was, how desperately people were trying to get out of that country in that situation. This is now January 1993. So the fighting kind of ended mid-December. A few weeks later, we flew into Dushanbe. And it was a ghost town. Paivand was the only thing remotely looking like what we would call a nonprofit organization that wasn't governmental and yet was somewhat, had the inside track and the ability to work within the government. So it was an ideal partnership. So Mr. Osimi and myself, we signed an official MOU. How do we bridge cultures? How do we build friendship? Some of these more or less definable or quantifiable goals, but still really, really important. We launched into Tajik American symposiums. And this was also with the support and help of the U.S. Embassy. Stanis Kadero was there, and they were holed up in the Tajikistan hotel initially.
It was March, we arrived back, I think probably the 11th, March 11th of '93. Our situation was very primitive. We washed our dishes in the bathtub.
So I looked at Mr. Osimi and said, well, we're not going to build a new runway for you. We don't have those resources, but there's this thing called email coming and the internet. Have you heard about it? And by 1995, we launched the first internet email service for the whole country. And we set up free email centers in every major city. We gave away about 100 modems and in the end, hundreds of computers. and then just connected everybody as quickly as we could. So eventually we had the president, the embassies, universities, hospitals, even the KGB, believe it or not, hooked up with us in email. I guess what I would say is I watched Mr. Osimi straddle this process and this transition. He had friends on every side. So that was one of the strengths, but it was the problem. He kept friendships, and he was this bridge builder on both sides of the fence. And he was friends with both, and very well respected. It was so uncharted in knowing where Tajikistan was going in those days. Was it really going to go for a real freedom? Was it really going to have the kind of ideals of what we call democracy and all the rest? Mr. Osimi was unique, and looking back in that time period of sensing the time in history and the opportunity to grab it and to start saying, if we're going to have this, make the most of this window, let's do it now.
Because one should not be indifferent. Sometimes we close our eyes to many things and think it will pass. Every person feels like he can do nothing, but together, they can do everything.
I think the thing that held Tajikistan together and held the people together despite their various languages, despite their tribal differences, the thing that held them together, that enabled them to come back together, I think, was their reverence for their culture, for that which makes Tajikistan Tajikistan. In Tajikistan, there is a greater appreciation of, study of, and reverence for language, for poetry, for literature of all kinds, for music, for science. That kind of thing is unifying. This is where I think it's important to remember Dr. Osimi, because he was within the cultural community regarded as a giant of a man, because he devoted himself to the preservation of their scientific traditions. And I really think that appreciation for their culture and their science and their history, I think that was a major pillar of the resurrection of the country. And for this, I think Dr. Osimi deserves a great deal of credit.
کمال افتخاری تمامی تاجیکان است، نه فقط تاجیکان تاجیکستان بلکه تاجیکان جهان و زیاده از این تمامی فارس زبانان جهان، چون کمال همپایه حافظ لسان الغیب، حافظ شیرین سخن و دیگر شاعری بزرگ ما ناصری بخاری، این سه شاعر
Art saves people. Reciting poems, playing music, singing together, that unites people. And from that point of view, Tajiks has a fantastic history. And this time also, when the civil war started, we having our genesis alive, we knew that art will save us.
Mrs. Shahidi played an important role in providing a site where these groups could come together and practice, and where they could feed off of one another.
When we were making that our activity, many people were hesitating, saying, what is this museum at that time of war, fighting, and thinking about bread and money, and you're thinking about museum? It's ridiculous. But Muhammad Osimi said, it's the right way to survive. Yes, let's help her. As soon as we had that encouragement, of course, Minister of Culture, they followed him. Many poets, famous poets, musicians, composers, actors, they followed him, of course. This room is a special place also because we want to show the first women actresses in Tajikistan. Well, you know, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Iran, they have common cultural background. They speak one language, Persian. And that's why the poems of Saadi, Jami, Maulana, Jalaluddin Rumi, Bedil, they are all understandable for everybody from different countries. And that made a unique atmosphere here.
There wasn't a coherent effort to destroy Tajik culture. That wasn't the idea. But it's just that there was so much death and destruction throughout the country. But in the course of that kind of destruction, really mindless destruction, so many things, objects were destroyed without thinking about it. And that's what was happening. So what Ms. Shahidi saw was a crying need to provide a sanctuary for preservation. And that's what she began to do.
It's unbelievable. That tambour belongs to Shohnazar Sohibov, the last musician of the Amiri Bukhara from Bukhara. We are at the Museum of Musical Culture, named after my father. My father, Ziaudullah Shahidi, was a composer, music composer, and he is known today as a founder of modern Tajik music. Here, we collected the most important documents as the evidences of our development. The first rehearsal of traditional and modern musicians, first Tajik Uzbek composer, the first decade of arts and literature in Moscow. My grandfather, enemy of the people, during the Stalinist repression, the books of Omar Khayyam, Hafiz, Abdul Qadir Bedil, some of them burned during Stalinist repression. And this is opera Comme des Ramadan. One is Muslim, the other is Hindu. The only opera based on interreligious dialogue. Our operas, our ballet, it could be so helpful now in that process of recognizing each other, I mean Islam world and the West. It could be so helpful today. And that was one of the research issue started by Muhammad Osimi when he was the president of Academy of Sciences. And he said, yes, let's show our civilization as a crossroad of cultures. Let's show how we got the interesting aspects of other cultures in order to enrich our own culture. So, fantastic ideas.
This was a man who unfolded his personality as a man of aesthetics, as a man of taste, as a man who could look beyond the constraints of physical world and even transcend into other world. After all, poetry and poetry like this, when you speak of love, when you speak of romance, when you speak of nature, it transports you into another world. I could see distinctly from his face that he was not a man of this material world at that point of time.
So Tajikistan's independence was, we have open doors, And yes, we really want to see all those we haven't been able to see and interact with. And yes, we want to publish books together. And yes, we want to sit around the same table and eat the same rice and listen to each other's music, and we are open to the world. And oh, you're an Iranian from the opposition living in Sweden. Who cares? You should come too. And oh, you're the writer working for an association inside Iran under this regime. I don't care. You should come too. Okay, there's this expression in Tajik which is fantastic. It says, you are the light of my eye, the crown on my head. So you are welcome, that's what it means. And I think Dr. Osimi was living that and actually making it happen.
It was Osimi's drive and charisma that brought Persian speakers together and perhaps held his country and the region together as well.
During the
Civil War, Osimi said, "Come over to Tajikistan and let people know that they have allies and support." And through serious difficulties, we visited Tajikistan to let people know we supported them. When we were working on this project, its main aim was creating a solid basis for our association, which we could then register like an organization. A solid structure that, led by Osimi himself, could unite Iranian speakers and Tajiks around the world.
He made a newspaper in Farsi in Tajikistan, put the name Peyvand. He brought one of those and showed it, and so I am Iranian and I know I love my country too. So I invited lots of people. When he wrote, he said, we have it in Farsi language and we have it in Farsi writing. People, they say, oh, they loved him because, you know, all of those Iranian. So I took him to the Persian TV and he talked about Tajikistan. And little by little, all of Iranian, because they were watching that one, all of this, oh, who is this Mr. Osimi? Who is he?
UNESCO had already in the year 60s the history of humanity. This was a very, very important, I think, because only one organization like UNESCO can do this, to talk about the humanity as a whole.
As UNESCO began to deal with the history and civilization of different regions of the globe, a day came when they found that it was very important to have a comprehensive history of Asian civilization.
But it's very important that because of persons like Asimov, the interest to study the Central Asia was already in the year 1973. There was one association for the study of cultures in Central Asia. And then later on was a meeting in 90, I think that was 80, around 80, when from the association was created already this International Scientific Committee for the Study of Central Asia. That Asimov was the chair.
He was a scientist, but not with narrow focus. He was multi-skilled and had encyclopedic knowledge. It's rare that a philosopher by education is also an outstanding Orientalist and historian. Taking this into account, along with his personality, he was the perfect person to choose from Tajikistan for such a mission.
He was one representative of USSR and from the Academy of Science at this moment, but he was very clear that immediately he said, no, we cannot, for example, put aside China. China is extremely relevant, even if we are talking about Central Asia, because the western part of China is also one part of this area, of the Silk Road, of all these very important areas in which this interchange of cultural beliefs was precisely facilitated by these commercial routes as was the Silk Road, etc. And it's for this that you have in this committee that was chaired by Muhammad Osimi, you have Chinese, you have Indians, you have of course Pakistan, you have of course Iranian. This is why I consider that Osimi made a very good job, because he invited to be editors and contributors to these different volumes persons that represented all this area.
Muhammad Osimi led the team to take on the monumental task to chronicle the history of Central Asian civilization. This involved overseeing meetings throughout half of the world and allowed him to once again strengthen connections with Tajiks, even in France.
Then he went and he was working in UNESCO during many years. Yes, in UNESCO, in the headquarters. Yes, at Paris. Yes.
Journalists knew that Mr. Osimi was staying at our home, and we invited them to do their interviews with him there instead of the offices of UNESCO. So they came to interview him for many articles and shows. One of the journalists asked me, "Are you Iranian? We thought you were Tajik." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Mr. Osimi is staying with you and he seems to be so at home." So they thought my family and I are Tajik. I said, "We are both Tajik and Iranian. There is no difference. But we live in France."
It was our family decision, so I will come with my father and we will get a camera here on that period. So it was something very new trend to make a video, home video, and we decided to make a home video, just to make a video of my father. And even on the first days we arrived, so we got a camera and we started to make a film. It was Saturday, I do remember, because on weekdays he used to go to his office and I had time to go to the city. And on Saturday, in early morning, we came here to the Luxembourg Garden. I am full of emotions to sit again on the same bench. I used to sit, and my father used to sit here, and just all memories come again. Here you talked about the French people, about the French culture, about the heritage they have. So mostly when we walked together and we talked about the cultures, about the civilizations, about the history of this culture, and how it connected to the history of science, because he was a scientist. From our childhood, we were introduced not only our culture, Eastern, but we were introduced on Western culture too. So, and we read a lot of books with the French classic books, and it was starting from Jules Verne, and then Alexandre Dumas, Victor Hugo, and Balzac, Maupassant, Georges Sand, just many books. My father encouraged us to do that. Himself, he was the person combining two cultures, just Western and Eastern cultures, and so he could keep this in balance.
Dearest Professor Bosworth,
از پیش رفتند.
با چنان یک خط.
So he worked a lot on editing manuscripts, and you know, this was a very important project of UNESCO.
میروز کتاب رو من دیروز از پاریس آوردم. این کتابی تاریخ، جلد اولی تاریخ تمدن آسیای مرکزی. آسیای مرکزی به معنای وسیع کشورهای یک حوزه مشترکی، حوزه در گذشته مشترکی تاریخی فرهنگی را در بر میگیرد. به اینجا آسیای میانه ما امروز یعنی تاجیکستان، ازبکستان، ترکمنستان، قزاقستان، قرقیزستان، افغانستان، ایران، پاکستان، هندوستان، مغولستان و قشقر یعنی قسم غربی چین، همین را ما آسیای مرکزی میگوییم. همین تاریخ را ما در 6 جلد آماده ساختن هستیم.
And this project was completed, one of the most reliable, dependable researches done in 6 volumes, perhaps the finest that could have ever been written. And the whole map, the whole blueprint was prepared by Osimi. So in that sense, his contribution is unique indeed.
What I wanted to underscore is that this made the knowledge of Central Asia to all the world. Because what we need is understanding, and this was, I think, the main reason by which Asimov was in this forefront of the struggle, because he wanted to say, if we know each other, if we understand the others, then we can live all together. We can live peacefully, and we can share, and we can have a common destiny that is not always based on the confrontation and on violence.
Ironically, Osimi would not see the final 2 volumes completed. The last one he did oversee, Volume 4, was written at the height of the Tajik Civil War. With the unity and territorial integrity of his home nation at risk, it was as if Muhammad Osimi was drawing on the echoes of his ancestors, creating a reminder of the history of his nation and a hope for the world.
It is our sincere hope that the publication of the first volume of the history of civilizations of Central Asia will be the first step towards the promotion of the cultural identity of the peoples of Central Asia, strengthening their common cultural heritage, and consequently will foster a better understanding among the peoples of the world.
It remains for me to thank the rapporteur and members of the International Scientific Committee who have collaborated to shed new light on Central Asia with this detailed account of its vital and stirring past. I am sure it will prove a notable contribution to the study and mutual appreciation of the cultures that are the common heritage of mankind. Yes, this is our common heritage as well.
The cultural organization which Osimi founded was called Paywand, connection. He called people of different ethnicities, Uzbeks, Turkmens, Kazakhs, everybody to his assembly, talk to them, advise them to live together. You are people from one area. We have common interests, common economy, connections, land and sea connectivity, so many things are there. We cannot live separately, we cannot think separately. We have to together. And That is wherein lies the importance and relevance of Osimi.
So I arrived in May 92 in Dushanbe. And very quickly, actually, I met Mr. Osimi. And I never told anyone, but he cried that day, Mr. Osimi, while we were having a talk. Because it was an incredible period, those months. It was more or less than a year after independence. All the intellectuals, the great men and women, everyone was in the process of questioning himself or herself. Something big had happened. It was not a banal moment. It was a historical moment.
And then all of a sudden, everything that they had been told about the universe, about how history worked, about how nations worked, suddenly collapsed in a day. And then they were told that, in fact, it was all upside down. They were told that there was no dialectic materialism. They were told that government-directed economies didn't really work very well if you compared them to free market economies. They were told that their Soviet friends and brothers had actually been colonial masters. And they were told that those of us who were their deadly enemies were really their friends.
So everyone was questioning himself. Was I good? What did the Soviet Union mean? Is independence exciting? What's going to happen? What does the future hold for us? How truthful were we in the ancien régime, in the old regime? Did we believe in it? What did we like about it? And I remember Mr. Osimi saying that, and that's why he cried, because he had been Minister of Education in the past, during that period. And he was saying, I hope I was a just minister. I hope that I had not privileged certain and paid less attention to others. And so he said, and he cried, because I think he was wondering if he had been a fair minister.
And I'd ask my father, why did you do this way? Why you didn't choose a way which will bring benefit to you? And why do you choose the other way, which, yes, it's a benefit to others. It could be done this way. So I could think about my personal benefit, yeah. But on that case, I wouldn't be myself. I wouldn't be Osimi.
Dr. Osimi's vision, his idea of what may come, was remarkable. Just prior to Tajik independence, he had fought for his language, perhaps knowing its potential to unify his country.
So people of Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Iran, we speak the same language. We have the same root, the same culture and heritage and history. So having our Tajik language as official, it was reconnection to all our past history and connecting our past, present, and future. It was July 22nd of 1989 when my father came back home so happy and excited. And he said, my dearest children, today is my happiest day of my life. Today, our language, Tajik language, got official status. Through the language, through the keeping our heritage passing, which was written in our language, Tajiki, Dari, Farsi, to the next generations, because of all our heritage and national values.
Mr. Osimi was using the Persian language and culture as a tool to try to bridge these gaps and to say what unites us, how can we bring people together.
We lost our father in July 29, 1996. My mom decided to move to Khujand. We could not stay longer. It was dangerous to stay in Dushanbe. Then we had to move from Dushanbe to Khujand, but it was very, very hard time. And my mom decided to move his library. But can you imagine to move all those 4,000 books? It was wartime. We put all the books in the boxes and through the mountains, with a container, high mountains, taking all his books, bringing it to Khujand, and putting everything in the same way, the same order. It took us about 4 months.
His library is an incredible symbol of what the man stood for. No matter where or when, the Osimi home was always full of books and guests.
He invited me to Tajikistan for 1 month as guest of the Tajik Academy of Sciences, of which he was the president at that time. He invited me to his home for the first time. That's a great thing I remember. He invited me for lunch, for dinner, to his place.
You come in and there's this vast array of fruits and vegetables and a whole host of different kinds of salads and things like that. With soups follow that, and then the main dishes will come. There might be 2 or 3 different kinds of meat, any number of different vegetable dishes, and then a variety of desserts, and that's followed by dancing, in which one might or might not participate.
So I went to his place. Now, for me, that dinner party was historic in the sense that it gave me the clear picture, the Tajik way of life, because it is not, Tajik dinner is not just dinner, sit and eat and go away. No, it is a huge function. It's a huge representation of Tajik culture. There were about 20 guests. It was an assembly of intellectuals, academics, politicians, and philanthropists all together. Now, Tajik dinner is a strange thing which people normally do not understand. It is a place, an occasion where the best of Tajik comes out, the best of poetry comes out, the best of culture comes out, the best of light humor comes out, the best of dancing comes out, the best of drinking comes out. Everything comes out in one.
I was very young at the time, and I remember we all children were so excited to have some people, some guests of a family from India.
I was transported into a different world, quite different from Indian life, quite different from Kashmiri life. It was quite, so late at night, maybe at about 2, somebody dropped me at my place, and then as Gauhar tells me that after seeing Taj, she has all the night been dreaming about Taj. I, on that night, went on dreaming about that dinner party.
Of course, I had so many friends, but it was some kind of spiritual connection, intellectual connection between 2 great men, my father, Muhammad Osimi, and Professor Pandita. So, as I had the same common world vision and fundamental values.
Decades later, one of Osimi's daughters, Gawar, visits with Dr. Kashi Pandita in his homeland of India. Dreaming of the Taj Mahal as a little girl, she now tours this wonder with a man dear to her father and her family.
I want to see India through the eyes of my father. How did he see it? How did it? For me, it's so special to be in the places where my father was. And I'm trying to imagine how I was walking here and talking to people with this beautiful smile. But I know that this great country had big impact on my father because of, as I said, this is mosaic of these differences and coexistence between all these differences. It was very admirable.
Osimi had great love and respect for India. He told me once that India was the repository of Central Asian civilization. When he would look at monuments in Delhi and around, he traveled vast in India, in monuments, historical remains. And then when he looked at the contribution of Indians to Tajik literature, to poetry, and to interaction of music, in this way, this was what we call a conglomeration of various lines and aspects of civilization. This was one of the reasons why he loved India, one. Two, he was always shown great respect. This country has always shown great respect to Osimi, right from Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, and Rajiv Gandhi. Three prime ministers showed him great respect.
My father was a scientist and philosopher. And he always reminded that science cannot be Eastern or Western. Science belongs to the humanity. The art, literature, music, they have not borders. They all belong to the humanity. The dialogue of cultures is a great power for conflict resolutions. And my father believes that human mind and spirit should be free from any dogmas.
The poet Sadi Shirazi was a favorite of Muhammad Osimi, a major Persian poet during the medieval period. His writings were deep, both socially and morally.
One time, Mr. Osimi was quoting a poet who said, you can have three kinds of friends. One is you have a friend who's they call nani, which is you eat the common food. A common food and culture, you could say. Second is Zubani, which is you speak the same language, Persian. But the third kind of friend is Jani, which is somebody who's willing to give their life for you. Somebody who's a friend, what we would call true friendship. I'm Johnny, I will give my life for you. I'm willing to sacrifice. And in a sense, and in a very strange way, looking back, I mean, that's what Mr. Osimi ultimately did. I mean, he paid that price. An expression of love for his country and Tajik people.
On that day, my father, early morning, he went to the garden and cut two roses, white and red, and presented to my mom the same roses he sent from the war. And he told my mom, Johnny Shirin, my sweetheart, thank you for being with me for all these years. And I hope you agree that our wealth is our children and our books.
He was in high rank, but very down to earth. Yeah. That's why he was walking from his home to work. He didn't want a car. He said, I'm with these people, why I should go with a car?
He was going to his work by feet, so some people approaching him and ask to help for some translation, because he knows languages he can read, but he already started understanding things that it was not the real purpose. And on the streets there were kids playing, knowing him, and say, no, I would not do it here, let's go for some place. You know, I think he was not concerned really about himself. He had concern about others, that nobody get hit, that no kids around will get hurt. I'm pretty sure that was his intention and thoughts at that moment. There was school nearby, so they entered school, nobody was there, and then the murder happens.
All these years after his assassination in 1996, all these years down to present day, I've been asking a question to myself. Why was Osimi assassinated? Why? And my pain is so deep that sometimes I begin to disbelieve in the society that we have raised. He was not a man to have been assassinated. He was not a man. He was a man of humanity. He loved humanity. And why didn't humanity love him? Why he was paid back in that wrong coin, I fail to understand. And this man did not deserve the bullet. Whosoever be the force, I can say that they did a great disservice to humanity. They did a great disservice to people of Tajikistan, to us who are so much connected with these people, with this region. They did great disservice to us. That is the history. So he's no more.
Muhammad Osimi's life connected others, built peace when peace was a dream, and found the good in people, no matter their culture, language, country, or religion. This is not the end of his story. This is the beginning.
The history of a nation is made of the doings of the children of said nation. The history of a nation is not just a space in time from one century to another. The history of a nation is made of the doings of the children of said nation.
He lives on not only in his books, not only in his teachings, not only in his understanding the society. He lives in our hearts, and we are trying to use what he said, what he told us, what he taught us. We are using these knowledge to our students, to the next generation, in order for them to understand that who was Osimi.
Muhammad Osimi
Muhammad Osimi searched for talented youth and helped them. He looked for them in schools. For example, Kamal Boymatov he found in the former Soviet village of Tamermalik. He took this schoolboy under his wing, supported him, and helped him study physics and mathematics at the Moscow State University. Osimi was a great humanist. Ultimately, he always encouraged science and knowledge. Moreover, he was a man with passion. His heart was for his people. He was a patriot, a hard-working person, and was always appreciative of everyone.
من خواننده صنف 11
I am a student in the 11th grade studying physics and mathematics at school number 1, which is named after the first academician, Muhammad Osimi, in the city of Kujan. We celebrate his anniversary each year, but that's not the main reason why I am interested in him. For me, I wanted to learn more about him, so I read his books on my own. And his history gives us lessons. I would like to explain one of the ideas of our teacher, Osimi. In any circumstance, be satisfied. That's what he said. Why? Smile all the time and your friends will smile back. Smile all the time, and even if your enemies are upset, it's okay. If you are doing well, be humble about it so that your enemy won't be able to tell. Our teacher Osimi's life is a great example to us. His books and his research, we, the younger generation, should learn and implement in our own lives.
I thank the deserving children of my teacher, Muhammad Osimi. In your eyes, in your faces, I see the eyes of my teacher, Osimi.
Thus, left with not many days of life as I am, my heart goes to the children of my friend in Kujan. They are as good as my own children, part of my life. Who knows that we descended from the same ancestors who were one another's kith and kin before they migrated from Central Asia to northern India thousands of years ago. The blood speaks, so do I speak to Osimi's children. And they speak to me, the descendants of our common ancestors.
Honorable guests, thank you very much again for joining this beautiful day when we remember our grandfather, our father, a person that we all look up to.
I would read his books in his library, which I absolutely adored.
I never really got to meet my grandfather, but I'm really happy that we, as like a third generation, know about all of his achievements.
Of course, we are the continuation of our grandpa. We are the continuation of his great deeds, great thoughts, and high-minded doings.
I really look up to him, like what he done, and I really want to be like him in the future, and he inspires me.
وقتی من همین که کمی بیش به خلقم خدمت کردم و در دل آرزوی باز خدمت کردن دارم. وقتی من این که من مثل شما فرزندان عزیز نبیرهای شیرین دارم.
And what us brought here, it is our love and our relationship to Muhammad Osimi.
Happiness and love, endless music, dancing. When I entered this house, it was a whole magical world.
We all relate to each other from 5 generations down. It's connecting generations, connecting hearts.
All you've been talking about, kindness, wonderful treatment of the people, light, cheerfulness, wisdom.
Another motto of our parents, it was good thoughts, good words, and good deeds.
I truly believe that his legacy was brought forth from my grandparents to my parents onto me.
Both parents raised us with a worldwide culture, synthesizing East with the West.
He was a defined humanist, was able to see the dignity of humankind beyond any doctrines, whether religious, social, or political ideology.
We are the
continuation of our ancestors. He would always say, stay peaceful no matter what the situation is.
In our grandchildren, in our great-grandchildren, so this moment would be historic for 100 more years. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
Today I find that the world needs such people. The world is at a very critical stage of history where people must choose whether they have to survive or perish.
We are living in times where we have people in power who do not want history. There should be no history. History starts with them and ends with them, so that anything can be done, right? There is no history, there's nothing to test with. In other countries far away from Tajikistan, we're experimenting it right now. So yes, it's very difficult to fill in the shoes of Dr. Osimi.
This was what also Muhammad Osimi and the group that was working with him realized, that we must invent the future, that we cannot apply formulas from the past for the problems of today, that the impossible, the word impossible, does not exist. All the impossibles today can be possibles tomorrow. And this is what we must demonstrate, and this is what we must do. And today, we need a lot of Asimovs, you know.
And most interestingly, that death from human hands of teacher Osimi himself was impossible to imagine. However, our joint happiness and blessing is in the fact that such a person existed, lived, and he left to us the best, most wonderful memories.
When I visited the teacher's house, I would always think that the great personalities of our age would visit this house, would sit here and talk. But in the same way as Mavlavi said, one root has bound all the immensity of the world. A blood vessel of sorts stemmed from this house that was connected with the whole world, all humanity, and especially with the people involved with the ancient culture of the Tajik nation. Tajik culture and language, and the Persian language. The name of my poem is Paivan, Connection, and I wrote it on my way to teacher Muhammad Osimi's house.
ای رهگذر بیست بار بروی راه نگر نقش پای کیست این کوچه باغ سبز در آغوش شهر عشق سرشار مهر گرم و دل آشنای کیست این جاده عزیز قدمگاه عارف است یا باغ شاعر گلگشت شاعرانه شهرمرد عاشق است یا کوی دلبره هر کس که بود پیشتر از ما کشیده است زین راه کاروان نیاکان خیش را با رود رودکی و با گلبانگ مولوی ارواح شادمان نیاکان خیش را اینجا پیام حافظ شیراز زنده است راز کلام بیدل دلباز زنده است از هر دل ترانه اقبال می رسد پیغام شرق زنده و اعجاز زنده است این مرز دانه کشته عینی و میرزاست بعد 1000 ساله خیرمن سپرده ها، این دفتر محبت شیرین لایق است. این دفتر محبت شیرین لایق است در وصف زنده ها و به عنوان مرده ها. این کوچه باغ جاده فرهنگ تاجیک است. آغوش و کشاده فرهنگ تاجیک است. در پرده سروده یاد گذشته ها، آهنگ تازه زاده فرهنگ تاجیک است. این راه معرفت یک مسافر است، آنی که کو به کو غم ملت کشیده است. در عرصه جهان پیوند تاجیکان بار 1000 خواری و ذلت کشیده است. ای رهگذر بایست، بار بروی راه نگر، نقش پای کیست؟ این راه عارف است یا باغ شاعر، گلگشت عاشق است یا کوی دلبره؟ این راه خانه استاد آسیمی است، پیوند جاودانه استاد آسیمی است.